From 2007 to 2013, 3 Bioshock games came out and they were a global success, with them having sold over 43 million copies worldwide. And 13 years on from the last game, we're still waiting on the 4th one, if it's even real at this point. The Bioshock franchise as a whole has gone through a lot throughout its history. From releasing critically acclaimed titles, to developmental hell, broken promises, studios shutting down. The current state of Bioshock is an iffy one, but there was a time when we were actually getting games from them. So let's rewind time and go all the way back to 2007, when the very first Bioshock was released. On this day, we received one of my favorite video games of all time. In 2007, we were given the privilege to explore the world of Rapture for the very first time. And when it was released, it was met with praise across the board. This was seen as a masterpiece by most, and received countless awards. In a year that had Halo 3, Call of Duty 4, Portal,
Mass Effect, Assassin's Creed, The Witcher, Super Mario Galaxy, Uncharted, and God of War 2.
This was one of the greatest years in gaming history. And still, Bioshock stood above the rest in many ways. It was first announced in 2004 by Irrational Games, who were most known for System Shock 2 up to that point. But its first public viewing was a 15-minute presentation in 2006 at E3. From there, the hype was immense, and it delivered in every possible aspect.
They told me, son, you're special.
You start the game on a plane in the year 1960 over the mid-Atlantic. We go through one of the greatest openings in gaming. It pulls you in instantly, immersing you into the experience and getting you enthralled with the world at hand. As we are on the plane, it crashes into the sea and we seek refuge by swimming to this lighthouse. After entering, we find our way into this bathysphere and descend into the ocean, listening to a man named Andrew Ryan, speaking about a dream city.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow?
He states that the world above ground shackles the man. He wanted to create a city where they are not chained down by societal norms, censorship, or morality. He speaks on this as we see Rapture for the very first time.
I chose the impossible. I chose Rapture.
I don't think a game has ever captured my interest so quickly. This all happens within the first 3 to 5 minutes of the story. It introduces us to Andrew Ryan and instantly shows how he thinks society should function, and it also establishes the world of Rapture and gives it such character instantly. Rapture might be my favorite setting in gaming, and these opening few minutes encapsulates why. Before we even step foot into the city at the bottom of the sea, it feels alive. It has a purpose and a meaning in why it exists. This is one of the best opening sequences in a video game, and it truly is just the beginning. As we make our way through the sea in the bathysphere, we eventually reach our destination. From the outside, as we were approaching Rapture, I was expecting a little bit more liveliness once we entered. But our first interaction is watching a splicer murder this guy named Johnny and try to break into our bathysphere. So, not the warmest of welcomes to the city. We then meet this man named Atlas over some intercom. Oh, what a nice guy, asking so politely. From there, we finally step foot into Rapture, and instantly, the environmental storytelling is at play. As we walk, we see scattered signs reading, "Ryan doesn't own us, we're not your property, Rapture is dead," clearly signifying that Andrew Ryan's plan for this utopia that we were just listening to didn't go the way he wanted. As we continue to explore, we come in contact with some more splicers, get a wrench, whack a splicer a few times with it, and then inject ourselves with some needle. Who knows what urged him to do that? Oh, it does not seem like we're taking this well. From here, we get our first look at the Big Daddy and Little Sister. The designs of the different enemies and characters in Bioshock are fantastic, and they're at full display here. From the little sister having the glowing red eyes and a needle the size of her, and the big daddy having this massive drill in a diving suit inspired from the 19th century. These are just some iconic looks. But after our interaction, we have a new ability to shoot lightning. We have obtained our first plasmid, which will be one of the main gameplay elements that we engage with throughout, and something I'll touch on a bit more later. As we explore Rapture a bit more, engaging with the combat and learning how to use it, we are given a task and finally something to strive for. Atlas, who has been talking to us constantly throughout, has revealed his family has been cut off from him, and he needs help reuniting with them. We are tasked with going to Neptune's bounty. During this, we learn more about the world of Rapture and how it has gotten to this point. How plasmids have taken over and destroyed people's bodies and minds. We learn about the importance of the big daddies and little sisters, in a slightly graphic manner. How the little sisters were modified with sea slugs implanted in them to harvest Adam, which is a genetic substance that rewrites DNA from the dead bodies. And the big daddies protect them from the splicers who are trying to murder them and take the Adam they have. We'll interact more with the little sisters as we go through the game, but their backstory and how they came to be is utterly tragic. And again, it builds up the world so well and shows off the horrors of Rapture and how the system that Andrew Ryan put into place, the discovery of Adam, caused all of these events to happen. Everything that occurs in the city connects to one another and makes this world feel so alive. Following that, we have our first interaction with Andrew Ryan, and he puts us onto a detour towards medical. From here is where I believe we truly get into the loop of Bioshock as a whole. Irrational Games did a brilliant job of establishing a world and premise here in these first 30-ish minutes. They introduced all the building blocks needed to kickstart this narrative, and it really is a perfect intro to a video game. And it continues to impress as we explore the different areas of Rapture. Bioshock as a whole has so many strong points, from its narrative, characters, plot, but I think the standout is its world building. Rapture is already a standout setting, but it is elevated so much because of the way that they handle environmental storytelling as you play the game. I'll bring up some more specific examples in a moment when we get back to the story, but I want to touch on the audio logs that Bioshock uses to explain the lore and history of Rapture. Many games utilize this feature, but I don't think I've seen a game handle it better than Bioshock. It feels so seamless and natural in this game and is so integral to learning about this world. We get to see the moments of Rapture's fall and the start of the Civil War in Diane McClintock's audio log. We learn so much more on how Andrew Ryan thinks as a character. We see the mental side of how people acted due to Andrew Ryan's way of running Rapture. Especially in the medical pavilion where we go after our first target of the game and Dr. J.S. Steinman. Throughout our journey in the medical, the entire story is told through the environment, and by the time we confront Steinman, we already have this full story and history on him, and it doesn't interrupt the gameplay once. Dr. J.S. Steinman was a cosmetic surgeon and was greatly renowned for it, and was invited to live within Rapture. And he offered surgery to become beautiful to any who could afford to. But the true decline in his character came during the time that Adam became available. His desire for perfection mixed with overuse of Adam drove his mind to deteriorate, and this is one of the first true examples that we get to see someone lose their mind due to it. He wanted to become the Picasso of surgery, and looking at Picasso's art, yeah, that's not the ideal cosmetic surgery one would want. This led him to just completely mutilating people's bodies and making them asymmetrical. And we see this through the environment around us, with bodies everywhere who were victims to his surgery, audio logs getting insight to his path to insanity, propaganda and signs everywhere referring to his work. This is our first major example of the horrors that come from Andrew Ryan's ideology. His view on extreme individualism and rejection of morals and censorship allow for a person like Steinman to exist and have that freedom to embark on the practices that he wants to. With everything being privately owned and controlled by the man who created it, there is no way to stop it within this free market. And we will continue to see examples of people and how this society functioned due to this system, and how Andrew Ryan later reacts to the downfall of it. But after exploring the medical pavilion and eventually confronting Steinman, we take him out and steal the key that we needed to lift the lockdown. From there, we have our first direct interaction with a Little Sister, and this is where we meet Dr. Tenenbaum. We are given a choice here to either harvest the Little Sister and get as much out of them as possible, or rescue them to get less, but in turn Tenenbaum will reward you. This is the moral choice that you are given during this game, and it's fine. My only issue is that I think the benefits to harvest them do not outweigh the benefits enough of rescuing them, so doing the evil thing and harvesting the Little Sisters doesn't warrant much reason to do so. The choices you make throughout regarding them will dictate how the story ends. The collection of Adam from these Little Sisters directly correlates to the gameplay, as you need Adam to unlock more plasmids and upgrade them. This is the major gameplay element that Bioshock offers throughout this title, along with the guns, but that remains fairly simple. They really push for you to use the two systems to kinda create combos against enemies. You have plasmids like Electro Bolt, Incinerate, Telekinesis, and Winter Blast, where pairing them up with some weapons create a useful chain of attacks. And you also have more passive plasmids that don't do damage, but make fights easier by staggering enemies or pitting them against one another. I would say I found the gameplay to be the weakest part of Bioshock though. They succeed in every other area, but I just never enjoyed the combat. It was never bad, but I found the enemies to be damage spongy sometimes. Shuffling through weapons and plasmids wasn't the smoothest, and the movement is fairly clunky. As a whole, I don't think it creates the most enjoyable of experiences. I don't think it holds the game back in any way, but it could have been immensely better if the combat was improved, which it is later in the series. I think the combat works well as you explore, but from this point onward in the story, especially against Big Daddies, they just eat your ammo up. But getting back to where we were in the story, we continue our journey of saving Atlas's family. We make our way to Neptune's bounty to get to Fontaine's fisheries, where the submarine that has his family is. But to get there, we are given this task to collect this camera and take pictures of spider slicers for a man named Peach Wilkins. The camera is another pretty important gameplay element, and one I actually like. The whole concept of taking the photos to learn the enemy's weaknesses and do more damage against them is a fun feature. But after we collect those photos for Wilkins, he betrays us, claiming we're an agent for Fontaine sent to kill him. This man's acting like Fontaine is alive or something. What an idiot. And why would we listen to what he says anyway? Peach Wilkins was a man who was subdued by Andrew Ryan and his idea behind the Great Chain. He thought the free economy that was offered within Rapture would warrant wealth and success, but that never came for him. He was stuck working in Fontaine Fisheries and ended up joining a group of smugglers who worked for Fontaine. But Andrew Ryan inevitably cracked down on the smuggling ring, while Fontaine took most of the profits and threatened to turn them into Ryan if they didn't agree. I found this plot point very interesting, especially from the perspective of Andrew Ryan and this free market. I feel like the idea of smugglers is a bit contradictory to this laissez-faire system, but Andrew Ryan is a major hypocrite, and we see this with the cracking down on smugglers. If it was truly a free market, they'd be able to do whatever, but with the competition to his standing, he retaliated. You could also claim that they were contacting the surface in a way that Andrew Ryan didn't want Rapture to do. But once we fight and defeat Peach Wilkins, we continue on our way and finally make it to the submarine where Atlas's family is, and we see him for the first time. This is it. It's finally time to free his family and try to escape. Oh. Andrew Ryan comes in once again over some intercom and sends splicers after us and blows up the submarine. Atlas's family is dead. Both of our motivations are gone, and we must make our way to Arcadia and get to a bathysphere to go reach Andrew Ryan and take him out ourselves. We make our way to the next section of this game, which involves Arcadia and the farmer's market. This is one of my favorite parts in the game purely off the setting. Having this lush greenery everywhere is such a contrast to the rest of the game. It is such a distinct area and I just really enjoy it. And something that I was noticing around this point in the game is that each distinct section on their own isn't really advancing the plot much. I'm not saying it's an issue, it has just stayed fairly the same, and there are very few moments in the game where the plot actually shifts and develops. Bioshock throughout is so focused on its world building and different character studies within each new area instead, which I really enjoy. By the end of the story, we are so interconnected to Rapture as a whole because this entire game is so focused on exploring it and fleshing out the lore around it. But the main person we work with through this area is Dr. Langford. She is a botanist and was a big contributor to the creation of Arcadia, which supplied oxygen to Rapture. But Andrew Ryan turned the once free location into a commodity, forcing people to pay to visit the area and making them buy oxygen. Again, just another layer added to the corruption of Rapture as a whole. For once, Dr. Langford is a character that we don't have to take out, and is as normal as you can get down here. So Andrew Ryan does it instead. Soon after we enter Arcadia, Andrew Ryan releases a toxic gas that is meant to destroy all the genetically modified trees within Arcadia, which directly supply oxygen to Rapture as a whole. So we are tasked with creating an antidote that will revive these trees. Dr. Langford gets assassinated during this process, and we must complete the antidote ourselves and revive the forest. Bioshock is so funny to me because most of these tasks are fairly mundane and boring. Games have that issue where the tasks just feel like busy work or a way to fill up time in the story. Bioshock somewhat falls into that loop of trying to advance but something gets in the way, so we must go fix this to then advance. Obviously I don't expect resistant-free traversal through the story, it's just a repetitive system. Bioshock, I don't mind it though because Rapture is so brilliant and many other games bring these objectives to just fill up time, but Bioshock uses these tasks to give you more time in the world to learn about Rapture and get immersed, which is the highlight of the title. From there we start to make our way to Hephaestus, but are stopped and get stuck in Fort Frolic. This is my most memorable section of the game. It's not my favorite moment, but favorite level. We are introduced to this deranged artist named Sander Cohen. He's a little strange, but can't be that bad. He's letting us watch this piano performance. Never mind. We are forced to take out and photograph 3 of his disciples so that we can take the bathysphere out of Fort Frolic. Sander Cohen is just such an eccentric character that makes the entire segment so absurd. I really enjoy how each area is so distinct from the last. Like, there are no similarities from this area to Arcadia. But after completing his tasks, we are able to advance to Hephaestus, where we will go and confront Andrew Ryan. While we are in Hephaestus, we regain communication with Atlas and must create an EMP bomb to destroy Ryan's defenses so we can infiltrate his office, which has high security. After doing so, we reach one of the greatest moments in gaming history. This twist and sequence still gives me chills to this day. It is utter perfection. As we make our way to Andrew Ryan, we are faced with a board with over 100 notes scattered across, a picture of Andrew Ryan, Fontaine, Tenenbaum, and others. And over all of that in big red letters reads, "Would you kindly?" We listen to 2 audio logs, one being mind controlling a boy, and another describing some experimental human. Following that, we walk into Andrew Ryan's office and hear one of the greatest monologues I have ever heard.
What separates a man from a slave? Money? Power? No. A man chooses. A slave obeys.
The "would you kindly" twist is still probably the greatest twist I have seen within gaming. If it's not the best, it's at least top 5.
Run! Stop! Tell. A man chooses. A slave obeys.
Experiencing this for the first time shook me to my core. There are very few twists out there that completely rewrite its narrative and what everything has meant up to that point. Not even just the twist, but Andrew Ryan's monologue of "a man chooses and a slave obeys." It is so well done. We will get into Andrew Ryan in a minute, but learning that we have been controlled this whole game by only 3 words and that we have never made a choice for ourselves, it's mind-boggling. And you will never be able to hear Atlas the same way ever again. It is so seamless how it is executed, and my favorite aspect about this twist is the gameplay surrounding it. Very often, especially with linear titles like Bioshock, you as the player are not given choice. You only have one way of continuing, and that is to follow the objective given to you. This just becomes second nature. You simply trust that this is how the game is meant to be played, and this is what the player wants to do. But Bioshock completely flips it on its head, by using a common gaming trope to be the backbone of their twist. This lack of player agency and how we just blindly follow objectives was the whole point. Our character was controlled this whole game like a puppet to do what Atlas wanted us to. It is not just brilliant within the narrative, but it's a twist that bleeds into the gaming world as a whole, and how linear narratives are structured. It's masterfully done. Now, to talk about Andrew Ryan, this man is one of my favorite villains in gaming. Very few characters are able to command the screen the way that Andrew Ryan does, and you literally only see him in person once. The way that Bioshock was able to build up his character, mostly from these audio logs and other characters, is brilliant. I honestly think it is one of my favorite ways to see a character fleshed out is through other people's experience of them. Another story that does this really well is the anime Monster. The main villain, Johann Liebert, barely has any screen time, but you constantly see his influence on the world and characters through every single episode, and that in of itself builds his character up. But Andrew Ryan is so compelling in his ideals, from objectivism and individualism, the hatred of religion, morality, and government, the distaste of the parasite leeching on to others' hard work, and just the way how his ideals were so ingrained into the city of Rapture as a whole. I also love the hypocrisy he has, and how when he was trying to stop Rapture from collapsing, he took on this totalitarian mindset, completely contradicting his worldview and becoming the very parasite that he was so adamant in removing from society. Andrew Ryan was consumed by his own ego and desire to be the best, that when others took part in the society he created of a free market and to do what you want with no regulations, he fought back against the very system he put in place. And his death in of itself is so profound because even within this hypocrisy, in the very end he fights for his autonomy, making us be the ones to take him out, showing that he is a man and that he was able to choose. It is just beautiful. This is the pinnacle of the story for me and one of the pinnacles in gaming as a whole. Unfortunately, from here on out is where I actually have some issues with the narrative and gameplay choices. But firstly, after the twist, it is revealed that Atlas was Frank Fontaine this entire time, and of course he's been controlling us. The very first sentence he says to us after we take out Andrew Ryan contains "would you kindly," and it sticks out like a sore thumb. We then turn on the self-destruct override because we're forced to do so. Following that, we escape with the help of the Little Sisters and Tenenbaum. We wake up later on with Tenenbaum stating she was able to remove some of the mental conditioning from us, but not all of it. Our goal is to learn more about this and find a way to remove the rest to gain full autonomy to be free from Fontaine. We go through the final few areas of this game, starting off in Olympus Heights and Apollo Square, which I actually do enjoy. My issues don't come into play just yet. Olympus Heights and Apollo Square, we learn a lot more about Dr. Suchong and his involvements in everything, involving Adam, Plasmids, the Little Sisters, and Big Daddies. This man was so deeply involved with everything and is someone we never actually interact with, yet is so ingrained into the history of Rapture and our existence. After ridding ourselves of Fontaine's control over us, we are able to advance to Point Prometheus, where we become a Big Daddy, and following that we must protect a little sister to get us to Fontaine to take him out. I start to have issues around this point for a few reasons. Firstly, which is probably my smallest issue, is that we remove these mental restraints, but the gameplay remains the same, where it's linear levels and you have no choice. Yes, it is now Jack's choice in what he's doing, but it would have been cool if you offered some variety in how we approach these last few levels to show the contrast. Secondly, I think it drags a bit this final section. I don't enjoy having to find all the materials to become a Big Daddy and then becoming one, and then having to protect the little sister is a bit obnoxious. I don't like protecting a character in video games, it's really frustrating to do. But after all that, we go and fight Fontaine, which might be my biggest issue. Bioshock is a type of game that should never have boss fights to the scale of Fontaine. It feels so out of place, and it doesn't help that the boss fight itself is just bad. I feel like the sort of ending Bioshock should have gone for is in the same vein as the Andrew Ryan and Would You Kindly twist. That sort of ending fits in a lot more compared to this large-scale boss fight. We even see in interviews creative director Ken Levine saying that, yeah, we're not good at these boss fights and somehow always end up doing one at the end anyway. He fully admits that it was not good. The fight was boring, easy, out of place. This final stretch just drags the game down a bit for me. It was truly a perfect experience up through the death of Andrew Ryan, and it struggled to maintain its feet afterwards. But after we defeat Fontaine, the conclusion is a beautiful one. If you chose to rescue the little sisters, you get to watch them grow up and live their lives that you gave them, and then them all being there with you as you pass away. It is an emotional ending. As a whole, the journey and experience of Bioshock is one that every gamer should go through. It is one of the greatest video games of all time, and yes, it does not go without a few flaws, but I love it so much, and this is just the beginning of the Bioshock series, as we have another 2 games to go through. Following the monumental success that Bioshock was, a sequel was truly inevitable. So Bioshock 2 came into existence, but this was not developed by Irrational Games. This was developed by 2K Marin. Some of Irrational Games developers split after the first title to capitalize on the IP, and they made a sequel. So creative director Ken Levine was not on this project, as he and the rest of Irrational Games were working on Bioshock Infinite. 2K Marin was given a strict 2.5-year development window, and Bioshock 2 was released on February 9th, 2010, which was just about 2.5 years after the release of Bioshock. In many ways, this ends up being the forgotten title in the series, heavily being overshadowed by the first one in Infinite. So it was much to my surprise that this game is still amazing and severely underrated and should be talked about more. This title takes place 8 years after the events of the first Bioshock, so we experience an even more rundown version of the city. The premise of this game is that you play as Subject Delta, who was the first Big Daddy to be successfully bonded to a little sister. The opening of the game though has us 10 years in the past in 1958. As Delta is walking around with the little sister that he is bonded with, she eventually gets attacked and we defend her. But as we are attacking the splicers, we get hit with a hypnotized Big Daddy plasmid. Here we meet Sophia Lamb, who will be the main antagonist of this story. We learn that our little sister, who is named Eleanor Lamb, is not our daughter but hers. And with us being under the hypnotized plasmid, she makes us off ourselves. We jump back to the current day in 1968, where Subject Delta is revived at a Vita chamber, and he starts receiving telepathic messages from Eleanor asking him to save her. This sets up the plot and premise of Bioshock 2. The contrast in the opening compared to Bioshock 1 is prevalent, as here we are given a lot more of a concrete goal. We must save Eleanor from Sophia Lamb. The Rapture that we explore is well after the events of Andrew Ryan and Fontaine. This is a city that is now controlled by Sophia Lamb. And I just love how much she opposes the views of Andrew Ryan, and is practically the exact opposite of his ideals. How Andrew Ryan was all about individualism and the strength in the self. Sophia Lamb believed in the collective, and the strength behind that, referring to it as the Rapture family. She was all about removing individuality from oneself and that working as one is stronger. I think it works so well here having polar opposites in terms of philosophy, especially with the fact that we are still exploring Rapture. They needed ways to make it feel fresh and distinct from Bioshock 1. And they do that with new areas to explore, but also in Sophia Lamb's ideology. Because such a big part of Bioshock and Rapture was exploring it and learning Andrew Ryan's effects on the city. And we do that same thing here, but now with Sophia Lamb's collectivism mindset being at the forefront. Is it as good? Definitely not, but I still think it's handled well. Just like Bioshock 1, the environmental storytelling is a major focus. I won't spend too much time rehashing similar strengths, but as we explore Rapture, we see Sophia Lamb's influence on this rundown city. Throughout all the different locations, we see this emphasis on removing the individual to truly become one. There is this cult mindset that has bled into Rapture, and we will experience that through the people we interact with, along with the locations. As we start to explore, we talk and work with Dr. Tenenbaum, who explains the situation. Little girls on the surface are being kidnapped and brought down here to be turned into little sisters. That someone is continuing on Tenenbaum's work. She returned to Rapture and vowed to stop them. She does not want more children to die because of her sins. And as we explore, we see the evidence of this, especially through one of my favorite audio diaries in the series. The ones from Mark Meltzer, who was a father that discovered Rapture once his daughter was captured and taken there. And in the end, he discovers her as a little sister, becomes one of the big daddies, and you take him out like any other. We see through a real example this happening and the effects it has on families. But back to the current moment in the story, after meeting with Tenenbaum is where we really get into the loop of Bioshock 2 as a whole, and it definitely has a different feel compared to Bioshock 1. Of course, you have the more rundown Rapture, but I think the biggest difference is the fact that we do play as a big daddy, so we just feel stronger as a whole. The combat does function the same in many ways, with us having plasmids and guns to use, but we also have the drill, which was something I utilized constantly throughout my time with the game. There was one major addition though that made the combat so much more enjoyable compared to the first, and that was dual wielding. Being able to use both plasmid and weapon at the same time made the combat more fluid and fast paced. I could freeze someone then attack them in the same breath. One of my biggest issues in the first Bioshock was switching between plasmids and weapons, and now that's no longer an issue. And it became a strength in the combat, where the fluidity is just tenfold of the first game, and a direct improvement on the sluggish feel it had. Another big part of the gameplay loop in Bioshock 2 is the emphasis on the little sisters. They were important in Bioshock, but they were the focus on everything here in the sequel, from the narrative to the gameplay. You defeat the big daddies like normal, but now you adopt the little sisters and have them harvest Adam from corpses. You must then defend them against splicers that are attacking. I honestly got really annoyed at the gameplay loop of it, because it felt fairly repetitive, and some sections were purely dedicated to that aspect. I don't think in general Bioshock has great gameplay variety, but it was an active issue here in Bioshock 2, where in the others it just wasn't a strength. But once you complete the harvest in the area, you either rescue or harvest them just like the first game, and it does play into the ending. After that, a big sister would attack you, and you would have a mini boss fight against them, which I didn't mind. Big sisters are former little sisters who have grown up and are used to enforce order in the city by Sophia Lamb and Gail Alexander. While we engage with these gameplay mechanics and make progress, we are working with a new person that Tenenbaum told us to seek, and his name is Augustus Sinclair. We've had some bad experiences with a mysterious guy talking through a radio, so I was skeptical of him at first. But he helps us work our way through the city, and we eventually make our way towards our first main target in Grace Holloway. It functions very similarly to Bioshock as you go through these different areas and we deal with this person who has been influenced by the antagonist. It's done well, but at least for me it's nowhere on the scale of Andrew Ryan and Bioshock. To get help from Grace, we explore Popper's Drop. This was a place to live for the workers that were building the train network. But following the construction, they no longer had jobs, they could only afford to stay in Popper's Drop. Sophia Lamb sensed the desperation from the people and started offering counseling sessions so she could slowly spread her collectivist philosophy to these vulnerable individuals. And we continue to see this way of influencing others in other parts of Rapture. As we explore Popper's Drop, we learn that Grace Holloway helped raise Eleanor when she was younger and believes Delta was the reason for her disappearance and transformation into a little sister. Grace was a jazz singer who made songs against Andrew Ryan and his administration. Because of that, he blacklisted her and later on took her lover. And she eventually became a loyal servant to Sophia Lamb. I always find it so funny seeing Andrew Ryan make these moves when he was so adamant on libertarianism, no government or censorship, and directly does those things. But once we reach Grace Holloway, we are given the choice to take her out or spare her. These are another set of decisions and moral choices that the game has you make, and these will also later affect the outcome of the story. I decided to spare her as she truly just had a misunderstanding of us and the whole situation with Eleanor, which will come to light later in the game. But we can finally head out of Popper's Drop. We might have been sent on a small detour and have to make our way through Siren Alley and drain the next stop in Dionysus Park. We are confronted by Father Simon Wales, and he is another who was counseled by Sophia Lamb and converted to her cult. Simon Wales was originally an architect who helped design Rapture, but once the city started to leak, he lost credibility. After receiving counseling, he started holding religious services about her teachings. I've really been enjoying watching how Sophia Lamb spread her ideology, because we see it done through these therapy sessions. But also, she debated Andrew Ryan, and since she already had the backing of these people she counseled, she won very often. The way she influenced the city compared to Andrew Ryan is intriguing since her efforts felt like an inside job, and slowly waited for her moment to come, and it did. But back to the story, Father Simon Wales was completely deranged, so there's not really an opportunity to spare him here. We make our way through Siren Alley, take him out, and advance to Dionysus Park, which is one of the most important sections of this game. Here we get to learn a lot more about what happened with Eleanor and the history between Sophia Lamb and Andrew Ryan. This all starts with a man named Stanley Poole. Back in the day, he was a reporter, and Augustus Sinclair offered him a job to be a spy for Andrew Ryan to help get Sophia Lamb locked up, to show that her political movement was dangerous. So he infiltrates the family and exposes her. From that, he gained control of Dionysus Park, which was Sophia Lamb's private property. She made it to be a safe haven where all artists could be free of censorship from Ryan, and it was free to go to. Very much opposing Arcadia, which Andrew Ryan started charging people to go into. Once Stanley had control though, he mismanaged it, throwing parties constantly and embezzling park funds. Eleanor threatened Stanley by saying she'll expose what he's been doing. So he kidnapped Eleanor and sent her to a Little Sisters orphanage, where she ended up getting turned into a little sister. We discover all of this with the help of some audio tapes and Eleanor herself showing us memories of these events. I think this portion and the following area afterwards are the highlights of Bioshock 2 in terms of its storytelling. It's so reminiscent of the first game and how it is able to tell such a story through the environment and these diaries without ever interrupting the flow of the game and making it feel like exposition. Because up to this point, a lot of the narrative and history behind was unknown, and they reveal these facts brilliantly. Along with these revelations, we also discover how Sophia Lamb wants to use Eleanor as this leader for this utopia she is making, and that she has some special ability that can help her achieve that. In Dionysus Park, Stanley asks us if we can deal with the Little Sisters in the area so he can run away from his problems and the memory of what he did. But once we do all that and learn what Stanley has done, we are given the choice once again to spare him or take him out. And yeah, I took him out. I almost didn't because Sophia Lamb was low-key encouraging me to do it. But this level was phenomenal. Up to this point, I was wondering what bigger role Eleanor had in Sophia Lamb's plan, and we start to see the full picture and the unraveling of what she is trying to do through this collectivism philosophy. But once we finish up there, we head to Fontaine Futuristics, and we meet Gil Alexander. or well, at this point, Alex the Great. Yeah, he's not right in the head anymore. He was an ambitious researcher who helped create the Alpha series and later on the Big Sister suits. He eventually started working with Sophia Lamb and took on the New Utopian Project. This was where someone would take on the thoughts and desires of the collective and become this leader of sorts for this hive mind, losing all sense of individuality and becoming the perfect leader. We can start to see, oh, this is what she is trying to make Eleanor do. But this did not go well for Gil Alexander. To perform this utopian project, the recipient must get infusions of Adam to gain the people's thoughts and memories and ways they think. This caused terrible side effects to him and he started to mutate and become insane. With this utopian project not succeeding with Gil Alexander, she moved to Eleanor to try it on her, and she was the perfect subject. With being a little sister, she had the better compatibility with Adam and was able to handle it. And with Sophia Lamb molding her from such a young age with her ideals, it was a match made in heaven for this hive mind she sought. But we eventually do what we need to there and get the chance to spare Gil Alexander or take him out. Here I took him out as he had recordings throughout the whole facility prior to his insanity asking us to end his life. After all that though, we move into the final portions of this game and head to Persephone, where Sophia Lamb and Eleanor lie. After all this time, we finally see Eleanor in person, but she is behind this glass sleeping. Sophia Lamb proceeds to appear and states that Eleanor was the one who awakened us in some way, and that she is no longer her child, but a monster, as the bond between us has ruined her. Then she just straight up suffocates Eleanor so her heart can stop temporarily, so that we fall into a coma, as that's how the Big Daddies function. When a little sister's heart stops beating, the Big Daddy enters a terminal coma because of the biological pairing between the two. Here we go into a really cool section where Eleanor gives us a plasmid where we can control a little sister. In this part, we get to see the world through the lenses of the little sisters, which was so interesting as they see this beautiful world and it would occasionally cut back to reality where everything was destroyed and run down. But we are here gathering pieces of the Big Sister suit for Eleanor. Once we do all of that, Eleanor is able to free Delta and we make our final push to escape using the escape pod. But Sophia Lamb tries stopping us by planning to set off bombs to sink us to the bottom of the ocean, along with forcibly turning Sinclair into a Big Daddy, and we have to take him out. We eventually escape after holding off waves of enemies for Eleanor to do what she needed to do to get the escape pod functional. It reminded me of holding off the splicers for the little sisters throughout the game. I very much appreciate them not having some final boss here, as we know I hated the final boss against Fontaine. But we eventually escape with Eleanor. And one thing I really enjoy about the ending here is the variety, because your choices brought about more interesting outcomes. Depending on what you do, Eleanor will act differently because she has been watching us this whole game, and her personality is dictated by us, which I really like. I was a good person and all, so I got the good ending where she absorbs my atom so we can live on through her as she talks about a new future for the world and forgiveness. Sophia Lamb will also live or die depending on if you spare all the people or murder one of them. I think the best aspect of Bioshock 2 is its emotional aspect. I don't think the game is necessarily sad or anything, but they do a great job exploring the dynamic and relationship a Big Daddy and little sister can have. And watching Delta and Eleanor throughout was beautiful and offered a really sweet conclusion. I like that contrast in narrative from the first Bioshock, as that one felt more politically driven, where this one was centered around more emotional story beats. Eleanor Lamb's journey contrasts her mother's beliefs brilliantly, as she was created to just be this hive mind leader and erase individuality. Yet in the end, she was influenced by the individuality that Subject Delta had and was changed because of it, directly opposing the world Sophia sought. Overall, Bioshock 2 is an extremely underrated game and should get the same love as the other two titles. It still might be my least favorite, but it is very close between this and the final game from Bioshock, and that is Bioshock Infinite. Directly after the release of Bioshock in 2007, Bioshock Infinite began development under the codename Project Icarus. And to this day, the development of this game is regarded as one of the most chaotic ever. This title was led by creative director Ken Levine, just like the first one. And a few years onwards after development started, the game was announced to the public on August 12, 2010. And then in 2011 had a gameplay demo at E3 that drove the hype and anticipation off the charts. The scale that Bioshock Infinite was promising to reach was never seen to that point. From the combat and traversal, interactive environments, character AI and interactions, branching narratives, Irrational Games were attempting something special. But as you all know, the final product was a shell of what was shown in that gameplay demo. Bioshock Infinite is by no means a bad game. I think it's fairly good, and it was released to phenomenal scores from critics, but it gets overshadowed by the potential of what it could have been. In early development, they were given so much freedom and time that no true structured progress was made for years. Concepts would be played with, then scrapped, and years onwards, all that was there were slices of the game. In 2012, a veteran producer was brought in to help wrap up production and came to see that there wasn't even a functional playable game. There were great individual aspects, but no put together experience and build. So to actually release the game, they were put under an extreme time crunch, where this scale that the demo showed off never came to fruition, as many portions were scaled back or completely scrapped, so they could get a product out. So this ambitious project that was shown a few years prior was not the title that was released on March 26, 2013. We'll talk about the development and scrapped ideas throughout the video when they're appropriate to bring up. But now to open up the story, we start off in 1912, so well before the events of the previous two Bioshocks. We start off in an ocean heading to a lighthouse. Where have I heard this before? We are playing as a man named Booker DeWitt. Our goal is to bring a girl named Elizabeth Comstock to New York unharmed. We have to do this to repay our debt. What this debt exactly is, we are unaware of at this point in time. After getting off the rowboat, we leave the twins that brought us there and make our way to the top of the lighthouse. We are then launched into the sky and experience an opening very reminiscent of Bioshock 1.
Hallelujah.
The past two Bioshock games we explored the world of Rapture, but now in Infinite we explore the flying city of Columbia, and instantly, once we land, we realize, oh, there's some weird religious stuff going down here in this place. With the choir music playing in the background, confession stands, signs about a prophet and a lamb, stained glass murals. Bioshock has been known for environmental storytelling, and within a few minutes of landing, we get the gist of the experience that we might be dealing with in the city of Columbia. And as we reach the end of this location, we must be baptized and reborn to enter the city. As we go under the water, we get this weird vision of us in an office and opening a door to a city being attacked and burned down. This office will be shown multiple times throughout the game. But once we come to, we are officially in the city, and it's gorgeous. Columbia, especially through this opening, is the polar opposite of Rapture, where that was well past its prime, run down and broken, splicers everywhere trying to take you out. Columbia was seemingly a thriving city. We take in the flying buildings, blimps, sky rails moving crates, a living civilization with businesses, families walking around. And this peaceful introduction continues as we explore this fair and play games, win prizes. See the twins again somehow. What? It is so out of character from what we're used to from this series. But underneath this seemingly picture-perfect city, there are issues at play. We start to see some images of this false shepherd, and it seems like it's us. We also experience examples of extreme nationalism, racial supremacy, especially when they try making us throw a baseball at an interracial couple. This is where the seemingly perfect city starts to show its cracks. We are instantly thrown into the combat, and this is where things start to kick off in the story. The objective remains the same as we continue our pursuit for Elizabeth. One of the biggest improvements here in Bioshock Infinite is its gameplay, especially when we compare it to Bioshock 1, which was Ken Levine's Irrational Games' last project. The jump in quality and enjoyment is surreal. It went from my least favorite component within Bioshock to arguably my favorite here. Firstly, the gameplay in Bioshock Infinite is so much faster paced, and it needed to be, because they increased the scale. We went from fighting in smaller corridors in Rapture to the clouds and open sky of Columbia. We are given hooks to instantly jump between and use verticality to our advantage. Sky rails to traverse through locations faster and avoid attacks. The traversal, pace of combat, and level design for fights was really improved here. Another feature I liked a lot were the vigors. This replaced the plasmids here and offered more variety in how to use them. You could chain multiple ones together to make unique attacks. I loved using the bucking bronco and the undertow together. And for the guns, they switched up the carrying system, so we could only carry around 2 at a time. At first I was confused by it, but I think only allowing you to have 2 weapons speeds up the combat, since you don't have to go through the menus to change them, and you still end up using all the weapons consistently throughout the story. They also added gear and removed gene tonics, which I thought was a bad decision, as the gear was just a straight up downgrade to the gene tonics. But overall, this combat and gameplay was one of the highlights of Bioshock Infinite, and it gets expanded on more later once we meet Elizabeth, and I'll get into everything revolving around her when the time is right. As we continue journeying through Columbia trying to make our way to Elizabeth, we are confronted by the main antagonist of this game and Father Zachary Hale Comstock. We have seen him constantly up to this point through posters and art scattered throughout the city. But we are confronted by him.
To repay a debt.
How do you know about that? He goes on stating he knows the future and can prophesy, and soon after blows up the blimp we are on. All of this builds up into meeting Elizabeth for the very first time on Monument Island, where she is being held captive. We see firsthand her using her powers to open up tears in the universe to other places and timelines. But once we meet her, our presence disrupts the Songbird, who's helping keep Elizabeth captive. So we convince her to escape with us, and the continuing sequence is just awesome. Bioshock Infinite does a really good job of making these epic action-packed moments. From here, the goal for basically the rest of the game is to escape. Booker DeWitt has gotten the girl he was looking for and is ready to go. And we get the full gameplay experience now, being able to play with Elizabeth as our companion. This was one of the major selling points in promotion and demos that were shown for this title. Her abilities and way she interacted with the environment was not the way it works in the finished product. She had a lot more of an offensive capability compared to her more passive role. The way that she was able to influence fights and the way she reacted to the environment was also toned back. And her engagement with the environment was not just toned back by her reactions, but also the amount of them. As in these demos, you seem to be in constant conversation with her, and that is just not the case in the released version. The way she was supposed to be able to manipulate fights and create tears based on your choices never made it to the end and were scrapped. But we do experience a version of these concepts as we continue on through the story, as she is able to create cover for us, more skyhooks to use, and things along those lines. Outside of that, she is also able to toss medkits, ammo, and money to us. Just the level of interactivity that was shown with her powers and the level design possibilities were so far and beyond what we did end up getting, even if it is still fairly enjoyable here. But as we continue trying to escape Columbia, we eventually confront a former acquaintance of Booker DeWitt and Cornelius Slate. He was a soldier that eventually moved to Columbia and lost his rank due to telling the truth about Comstock and how he wasn't involved in the battles that he claimed to have been a part of. And you have some choice to spare or take him out, but that doesn't hold any narrative bearing. One of the strong points in Bioshock 1 and 2 were the characters you meet throughout the game and how they've been influenced by Rapture, Andrew Ryan, or Sophia Lamb. But here, it just falls so short. We truly learned how Rapture functioned and saw it through the lenses of so many different kinds of people. But here it never felt like it was the focus of the narrative. I still think Columbia is a stunning setting, and I love witnessing the extremes of the ideologies they chose to explore, which I'll get into later. But after those events, we get to a moment where we are about to escape Columbia and head to Paris, which was Elizabeth's dream. But that was changed as we are trying to bring her to New York City. Elizabeth then knocks us out and flees after finding out. This is where the Vox Populi get introduced to the narrative, and I think more of my issues come into play with Bioshock Infinite. The Vox Populi are a group of revolutionaries going against Comstock, with his racist, xenophobic, nationalistic ideology. They are being led by Daisy Fitzroy. We eventually reunite with Elizabeth, and one of the major story beats and obstacles we go through is Elizabeth opening up different timelines and us traveling through them to reach our goal. The one we ended up staying in has Booker as the leader and a martyr for the Vox Populi. This causes a conflict with Fitzroy as she sees us as some imposter, as we're supposed to be dead. So we end up having to fight the Vox Populi and Comstock's forces. A major thing with Bioshock titles, like I've stated in previous games, is that there is not much plot development going on. A lot of the journey is focused around environmental storytelling and taking in the setting that you are in. But the history and existence of Columbia is something I never got invested in, especially with the Vox Populi plotline. You see within the demo how they function, interact with you, and it's really interesting, but I feel like all it did was make Columbia feel more chaotic in the actual release of the game. During all of this, we have to deal with Jeremiah Fink and Daisy Fitzroy. Fink was a businessman who was a part of the Founders Party and had close support from Zachary Comstock. He was able to utilize the Terrors to profit off them, from stealing music, obtaining advanced technology and science, and even worked with Dr. Suchong from Rapture. Through all the different timelines that we have gone through, we ended up in a reality where the Vox Populi had the weapons and the means to rebel against Fink, and we eventually witnessed Fitzroy take out Fink and then trying to murder the Sun as well until we interfere and stop her from doing so, in turn taking her life. One of the major talking points that was taking place during this revolution was the comparison between the two sides, the Vox Populi and the Founders. The game explored the idea of violence ensues violence, and also both sides are bad. I resonate more with the first point being made and a lot less with the second one. We really get to see this revolution be this realistic, gritty, and gruesome situation, much to the shock of Elizabeth, who only knew of revolutions through stories and never the harsh reality. And we see this violence ensuing itself, and the Vox Populi wanting to fight back against the Founders for being oppressed and condemned for not being like them or looking different, being a lower class. Basically all the above. And when given the means through these reality shifts, they fight back, and we see it taken to such an extreme. And we get to witness the violence that is incited in the name of rebellion. We see the extremes taken when Fitzroy tries taking out Fink's child. And I think we see the parallels between Fitzroy and Comstock, not for the reason behind their cause and why they fight, but more so with how they use propaganda to rally the people. Comstock uses Elizabeth and Fitzroy uses Booker as the face for their narrative when neither one actually are like the way that these people describe them to be. Elizabeth is no racist, xenophobic lamb that Comstock hypes her up to be, and Booker was no hero for the Vox, and was doing things completely for himself and his own means. I think there are a lot of interesting discussions to be had with these two groups, but I don't think it's explored the best within the gameplay. I never feel like there's that time to learn about the history of the Vox Populi and get the insight from individuals. Again, I just don't think they connect the dots nearly as well here in Columbia like the way they do in Rapture. But from all those events, we move into the late game of Bioshock Infinite. We confront the Songbird again, ending up dealing with Lady Comstock and learning that Elizabeth was never her daughter but adopted. Along with that, Zachary Comstock's efforts to erase that evidence by suppressing her powers and plotting the murder of the Lutece twins and Lady Comstock. And accidentally in doing so gave the Luteces a similar power to Elizabeth, so they can exist anywhere throughout time and space. But after that, we eventually reach Comstock's house until the Songbird kidnaps Elizabeth and we must save her. As we are attempting to find and save Elizabeth, we are pushed into the future by an elderly version of Elizabeth. This is a version of her that has suffered for decades from brainwashing and torture, as Booker was unable to save her and is always unable to do so because of the Songbird. As a result of the decades of pain, she became the leader of Columbia and waged war on the world below, as we see New York City burning to the ground. The older Elizabeth sends us back with a note on how to control the Songbird. With this newfound way to handle the Songbird, we go back to our current timeline and we save Elizabeth, while she was getting experimented on. Now that the two of us have reunited though, we at long last confront Comstock. While speaking to him, he blabs on about us being the false shepherd and being a wall between Elizabeth and her destiny. He then mentions Elizabeth's missing pinky and tells her to ask us what happened to it. Yeah, we didn't take that well. Booker takes no time at all to take him out in front of Elizabeth. From there, we held off waves upon waves of Vox Populi seeking to destroy the siphon that was holding back Elizabeth's powers. And we do so by controlling the songbird to do it. Once that happens, she gets full control of her powers and opens up a tear to Rapture. Seeing Rapture once again, for such a horrific place, it felt comforting to be back. Columbia is amazing and all, but nothing tops Rapture. Once we rise to the surface, we see the lighthouse from the start of Bioshock 1. And once we enter that door, we see an infinite amount more. There are seemingly endless timelines in different events, all these different possibilities depending on choices made. Which I found funny that they do this, as the game gives the player no influence over the ending or any choices throughout. Your choices don't mean anything. But that's the irony of it. I think it was meant to display the illusion of choice that is offered within games. I don't know if it is done that well though, and I wish we got the game from the demos that gives you those possibilities and branching narratives through the tears, but we don't experience that here. This commentary on the illusion of choice in a video game that never really pretends to give you any was slightly strange, but we also learned the true motive behind paying off Booker's debt that we hear from the start of the game. Elizabeth shows us in the past giving her away to Robert Lutece, who shows up at our home. We gave her away to pay off our gambling debt. This idea of getting her in Columbia was wrong, the debt was already paid back then. Her name was originally Anna, and that is a name that we hear Booker say a few times throughout the story. And we also have her initials on our hand. And we also learned that Comstock was the one that we gave Anna to. We regret our decision and try to get her back, but Comstock takes her, and we see her pinky get cut off, confirming that she is our child. So we get taken by the Luteces through a tear to a timeline where Comstock exists. In doing so, Booker suffers amnesia, but fills in the memories with the goal of getting the girl and paying off the debt. Exactly what the opening quote of the game states. After all these revelations, we want to stop the cycle of Comstock and bring him to an end. We want to break it off so the debt in Columbia no longer exists, and create a world where Elizabeth isn't taken. So at the ending of the game, we are sent to a baptism, and learn that we are also Comstock. At this baptism, he either regrets his actions from Wounded Knee and becomes Comstock, or he rejects it and stays as Booker DeWitt. This is the constant, and the point where we must stop the birth of Comstock. And the story ends with all these different versions of Elizabeth drowning us, to stop the birth of Comstock and to end the cycle. This twist is unbelievable, and there are hints to it constantly throughout, from the AD on our hand, the Lutece's tally board, the opening quote. There is so much that leads into the inevitable twist, and I love it. I do think it's slightly convoluted, but that might just be me being stupid. I don't think it quite reaches the level of Bioshock 1's twist with Would You Kindly, as it didn't hit as much narratively. This twist, I was like, oh wow, that's insane. But in Bioshock 1, I genuinely felt betrayed, and I enjoyed the gameplay commentary from it more as well. But as a whole, Bioshock Infinite was a really good game. I think nowadays it gets overshadowed by what could have been, and it's hard not to do so once you know about it. But the product that we did receive is still an experience that is worth playing and worthy of credit. There are flaws and issues outside of the cut content, and I will forever wish we received the Bioshock Infinite from that E3 demo. But it is still a Bioshock title worthy of its name. In the end, this has been the last Bioshock game that we have received, and the current state of the IP is one that is completely unknown. Following the release of Bioshock Infinite, creative director Ken Levine shut down Irrational Games. He downsized and formed a smaller team in the name of Ghost Story Games, and they are working on Judas, which has been over 3 years since it was announced and is slated to release somewhere between 2027 and 2029, so who knows when we'll see more of that, even though it looks unbelievable. But for Bioshock as a franchise, the publisher 2K Games kept the rights and dedicated a new studio to the IP in Cloud Chamber. And well, we have heard absolutely nothing about this game. but it's supposedly in development, they have just wasted many of those years burning through money. There are rumors it's meant to be in some Antarctic type city, but who knows how true that is? All we can do is wait for these games. But Judas is the one I'm looking forward to, as at least we've seen something of the title. The Bioshock franchise as a whole is one of my favorites in gaming. I enjoy all these titles, and the first one is one of my favorite games of all time. Each release has its own aspects that I love about them, and I hope one day we see the IP again. Will it be any good? I hope so. But no matter how many years go without any news from this franchise, we will always have the 3 games that have come out. And they are amazing.